Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire. Today, we're talking to Conway Bound, and we're talking about CRM. And CRM is an interesting skill that I've been taking classes in now for at least 20 years. And I took a class with Conway maybe, I don't know, 18 years ago or so. But from that, I got to see something really unique, and that's why I've asked Conway to be here in my video series. And Conway does a different spin on teaching this subject. And so, Conway, could you tell us a little bit about the books that you've written? Because I know you're also a writer.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Mike. Yes, I've written a couple of books, and the non-fiction ones actually stem from CRM. So I'll just show you the different books there. Just bear with me for a second. So here on the screen, you can see the books that are currently published. I've got another two in the pipeline at the moment. So on the left there, we have a journal for military symbols. That's mainly from my army work. So that's to help people understand military symbology when they're marking maps. It's a skill that's required. And in actual fact, it does have applications in human factors and CRM, because if you want to become situationally aware, you have a map. If all the symbols on there represent, say, units or actions that are going on in the battle space, you get instant situational awareness by looking at the map, but only if you can interpret the symbols that are on there. And so that's military symbology as used within, say, a battle map or a briefing an operations team. Not so much reading maps, it's mainly for the military. So it's based on the NATO symbology. So it can be used by any country around the world that's allied with NATO. It's not necessarily about reading maps. I actually have a specific CRM module on map reading and GPS, but this one is more about military symbology, so using it in a military environment and operational environment.
So, Conway, you actually have more courses than what we've talked about in our deep dives here that you've developed over the years for firefighters and for aviation people.
Oh, that's right. And it's these individual courses that help to spawn these books. So, for example, on the screen, you can see decision making. I have two books there called Sparrow Call. Sparrow Call is a decision making method that I created, and that came from human factors and crew resource management CRM training, because one of the modules within CRM is all about making decisions. And so I would study the different ways that we make decisions, see the thought leaders in decision making studies, such as Dr. Gary Klein, Cleotilde Gonzalez, those sort of people who have made leaps and bounds in the study and understanding of decision making, and then adapted all the decision making methods into one method to rule them all, to rip off the Lord of the Rings. So Sparrow Call is that one method to rule them all, and based on the work of say Gary Klein or Frederick Winslow Taylor and Herbert Simon and those thought leaders. To the right of that, you see risk management. So that was a special task that was I was commissioned to do for a New South Wales government agency that is responsible for a lot of the land within the state that is owned by the government or is looked after by the government. And they have a lot of fire trails that go through that land. And so they have to train people to do aerial inspections of those fire trails. And so they asked me to do a risk management package for their people, as well as to train them to be safe on board an aircraft when they go out and do these aerial inspections. And so that package there is all encompassing risk management. It teaches people about risk management, teaches people about the aerial inspections, and then how to use that risk management before they go out and do their aerial inspections of the fire trails, and specifically what they're looking for with those fire trails. Category 1, a Category 7, or a Category 9 vehicle going through a fire trail, how the drainage works, pinch points and turnaround bays, and all those sort of things that are necessary for a wildland firefighter who's out there on a trail, needs to be able to get their truck through there. You don't want to have a trail that all of a sudden is just blocked or they can't negotiate. So part of that training there is not only to make them safe in the aircraft, but also to know what they're looking for so that the crews on the ground can actually negotiate those fire trails. The last one on the right there is a work of fiction. It's a novel called The First Gentleman of the United States. It's a political thriller set in the 2020 election. And it's basically the first gentleman gets accused of assassinating the president, the first female president, only to find out that it wasn't as people think it was. I won't give it away. It's available on Amazon. I've written that one under the name of C.S. Tabown, Tabown. So it's not my name. All the other books are available via Amazon under my name.
Conway, I find it interesting that an Australian would write a book about the U.S. political system. What motivated you to write your novel about that?
I've always been interested in politics. I actually ran for Parliament here in Australia. I'm a huge fan of the United States. I really like the country. I like its people. Its political system has been very odd, so I've been quite fascinated by the American politics. And during, say, the Trump administration and the polarization of the United States after Obama into Trump, I could see that what I saw as a very stable society has become somewhat divisive and fractured. It's very, very interesting to see, because the United States, as far as I'm concerned, is the leader of the free world. And so you need a very, very strong country to maintain that leadership. And we see threats from other nations that are rising. Their economies are rising, becoming very, very strong. And so I would like to see the United States to be a cohesive and effective and ethical leader of the free world in this very, very troublesome time we're going into. And so I pay particular attention to the political system, and especially the machinations of the 2020 election. And I saw what I consider to be some rather untidy workings of not only the political system, but the media as well, and the way it all worked. And I thought, well, as an Australian, I can look at it from an outsider looking in, a friendly outsider looking in. It's like telling your cousin that the outfit that they're wearing is not that good. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a book about it, and in so doing, maybe help to explain the oddities of the American political system for, say, someone who doesn't come from the United States. I also know that a lot of people in the United States don't even understand their own political system. So I sort of wanted to try and educate people at the same time as telling a story about how the American political system works. And the story is about the first gentleman being accused of assassinating the president. But the other books are all derived from CRM. So I don't know whether you want to sort of go down and have a look at the individual modules of CRM. Would that be of interest to you, Mike?
Conway, can you tell us a bit about what CRM actually is for all of our viewers that have never heard of it before, and so that they could get an overview of the concept, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about what it is as a skill?
Okay, no worries. So CRM actually came from the United States and United Airlines and NASA back in the late 70s and the early 80s. Initially, it was called Cockpit Leadership Resource, and then became Cockpit Resource Management. But then they found that the concept had wider applications, not just inside the cockpit. So CRM, Crew Resource Management, is all about understanding how we work by ourselves and how we work as a member of a team. And in particular, it was the aviation team. So the crew resource management helps the aviation industry minimize those errors and unsafe acts that usually occur because of the human in the chain. As aviation became more reliable, as engineering became more reliable, they found that the percentage of accidents attributable to the human in the chain increased, and the percentage of accidents attributable to, say, mechanical or engineering failures decreased. Now, that doesn't mean that safety has become more dangerous. It's quite the opposite. Flying has become more dangerous. Flying is one of the safest means of transportation that you can undertake. What it just means is that the accidents that we do have more of them can be attributed to the human rather than to the machine. Does that explain it?
It does explain it, Conway. And can you tell us a little about how it works as a system, how it could be put to work for different agencies or different missions, or what a little bit deeper into it?
Okay, so maybe an easier way to explain that is to look at the different components of CRM. So the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has a recommended syllabus for what they call human factors training. And that's what CRM is. It's the human factors in the accident chain. So the ICAO syllabus is recommended to all the signatory states to ICAO, of which the United States is one, Australia is one, New Zealand, Canada, Great Britain, etc. So we try and harmonize our aviation regulations in line with the ICAO regulations. And so the subjects that ICAO recommends should be well known to the aviation industries within each of the signatory nations. And that's no exception to the United States and to Australia. So some of the things that you need to concentrate on in CRM training or human factors training, as shown on the screen there. So let me just start off with that circle in the middle there. You see element 1.1 on the top right-hand corner there. It's all about the human body. So the human body and its limitations and what can occur, how it may cause an unsafe act. So an example of that could be vision. So in that particular module, we talk about human vision. Now, I myself, I had cataract surgery a number of years ago, so my vision now is better than it was since the day I was born. I had congenital cataracts. I had no idea my vision was that bad until I had my operation. But I do know that when I was flying, sometimes I'd find it difficult to be able to see other traffic. So that's an example of an unsafe act brought about by the human body. Other examples are people who are hard of hearing, or maybe people who don't wear the appropriate hearing protection in times of high noise, such as when you're on board a helicopter, or when you're at a nightclub, or when you're in your car and you've got the doof, doof, doof music going so loud. Your hearing can get damaged. And so human factors training and CRM training educates people about how the ear works and what to do to protect your hearing and what would happen if you don't protect your hearing. So that's the human body module of CRM training. The next module that I teach is the human mind. That's all about psychology. It's things like personality, being submissive, being aggressive, how we deal with aggressive people. Psychology is also about communicating as well, but there's a specific module on communication. So the human mind element looks at those things that will impact the way that we process information. So it's our internal biases and those sort of things. It's all to do with the psychology of the individual. The third module there within that first section, which is all about the human body, is what I call the mind-body interface. It's those aspects of the human body that will affect the way that we process information. And examples of that are fatigue, more on cognitive biases, task saturation, task distraction, all those things that are going to inhibit our ability to process information. So that's the mind-body interface. We go into what's the green section there. The green section of my 10 key modules of CRM is all to do with working as a member of the team. There's the teamwork modules. We start off with communication. 9 out of 10 problems between people is usually because of a breakdown in communication, either because of a malicious intent or a mistake or a misunderstanding. So we look at communication and any of the barriers to communication. The next module is all about teamwork, how we operate as a member of the team, and of creating a new training regime called No Stopping for Teams. And there's a book coming out on exactly that. And that's the subject of one of our other videos, as you know there, Mike. And the last part of the group interaction is situational awareness. We look at what situational awareness is, and it's 3 levels: perceiving, comprehending, and projecting. Perceiving what's going on in the environment, comprehending what that means to you and your mission, and then projecting what's likely to occur because of it. And that is incredibly important, especially in dynamic and high-risk situations. The last set of modules, last group of modules, is all about operational application of CRM. So we start off with threat and human error management. That's risk management. We look at the things that are hazards, that are threats, the likelihood of them occurring, and what we can do to mitigate against those things. The threats that you know about, you can plan for. Then when they do arise, it's not a surprise, and you have a plan in place ready to address it. But there's also unanticipated threats as well. We need to be aware of that, and the best ways to mitigate against unanticipated threats. The next element's all about judgment and decision making. I've written a book about that, Sparrow Call, as I mentioned before. So decision making, the way we make decisions, the 5 stages of decision making, and how we can actually improve our decision making abilities. And the Sparrow Call method is one way of using specific steps when making a decision. And then the last element in the base, the central 10 themes of CRM is all about task planning, briefing, and debriefing. And debriefing is one of those things that we don't do very well in any organization. But after a significant event, we should be looking at debriefing it so we can learn the lessons, put that into our recorded memory and to our organizational memory, and then teach other people so that they learn those lessons and don't make the same mistakes that we made. So those 10 modules are the basis of my human factors training, but I also have a number of specialized electives as well. So an organization that engages me to provide human factors or CRM training, they can actually choose specific modules to include in the training. Those electives on there, shown on the screen on the right in blue, start with mission crew training. So mission crew are what we call in Australian regulations task specialists. They're people who perform a role on board the aircraft who are not aviation trained. And an example could be something that you see in the United States. You might have one of your wildlife agencies that needs to go out and say, count the waterfowl in all the rivers and lakes in a particular county. So the people who are actually doing the counting work for the wildlife agency. They're not aviation trained, but they are members of the crew for that mission. So that's what they're called, mission crew. And so I train people in how to be effective members of the mission crew and do things like be safe in the aircraft, know how to brief the pilot, understand map reading, direct the pilot, understand basic aerodynamics. So they know that on a hot day, the aircraft's not going to perform as well as it did on a cold day, those sort of things. That's mission crew training. Working safely around aircraft is another module that I do. Working safely around aircraft is a specific unit of competency within the Australian system. So some organisations require their people to be trained in working safely around aircraft so they know where the danger areas are. They understand the rules and regulations about entering an airport and walking out onto the tarmac. That's working safely around aircraft. The third module I have there is low flying in a wires and hazards environment, 20 years flying, most of it at low levels, they're below 500 feet, as well as a couple of years flying power line work. I started to understand the intricacies of flying at very low level, below 500 feet, and even below 200 feet, and right up against the power lines. And so I looked at the human factors aspects of extreme low-level flight, looked at the regulations surrounding it, looked at the aerodynamics around it, and looked at the flying techniques and created a specific low-flying course directed mainly at rotary wing in the Australian and the American contexts predominantly, but it's applicable to New Zealand and Canada, to anywhere where you have ICAO rules overlaying the national rules. The next element is all about map reading and navigation, particularly from the air. We are becoming a people who are so fixated on electronic devices and the applications that they provide us that we've forgotten the basics. The basics of map reading, just using a paper map, a pencil, and a protractor and a ruler. That's the skill that we are starting to lose. So that now we find that people who are heavily involved in navigating work do not know how to read a map, do not know how to read a paper map. And so if your electronic device fails and all you've got is a paper map, well, then you're going to be behind the eight ball. So I have a specific module just dedicated to that. And the last one is the helicopter landing site safety officer. So we have, same in the United States, we have lots of incidents of car crashes and those sort of events that require a helicopter to come in and land somewhere where it's unprepared. And so this is designed for the people who are on the ground who need to understand how they can make a landing site safer for a helicopter to arrive and to land at. And some of the considerations like the proximity of the landing site to the accident site, onlookers, are there obstacles in the undershoot and the overshoot? What direction's the wind coming from? Where is the sun? What's the surface like? How do they maintain or police that area so that onlookers are not endangered? So those sort of subjects. And that's another specific course that I'm currently developing and going to be putting out there. So that's a long explanation of human factors training in my version of it and the electives. Does that make sense to you there, Mike?
It does, Conway. And you and I both have spent a lot of our careers around aviation. Is there aspects of CRM that could be used outside of the especially aviation world? For instance, in a fire truck, or as with a hotshot crew, or with a raft team, or that's in Australia, or with the smoke jumpers. Could CRM be applicable to outside the cockpit of an aircraft?
100%. Yeah. So as CRM started to progress and go through its generational changes, they went from not just in the cockpit, but went to the whole crew. And then they started looking at the whole aviation team, such as the dispatchers, the baggage handlers, operations teams. And then other industries started to see its usefulness as well. Medical industry started to see that a lot of the lessons from CRM in aviation applied to the medical team, because back in the day, most of the pilots were male. You know, they were those alpha type personalities, and it was the same within, say, an operating theatre. Most of the surgeons were male, alpha type personalities, and so other members of the team sometimes might see an unsafe act likely to occur, but they didn't have the confidence to speak up. So in the medical industry, they saw that the human factors training that empowered subordinates to be able to speak up and trained team leaders to be more empathetic to their subordinates and more of a team member, that was incredibly useful within a high risk industry such as the medical field. But then it also went to high risk dynamic industries as well, such as firefighting. And it's not just wildfires, also structure fire. So any time when you are dealing in a dynamic high risk situation, human factors training has an applicability. You just have to tailor it for that particular context. And you mentioned a couple of smaller teams within the fire industry. So it's a crew, could be say a crew of hotshots, or it could be a crew on a truck, or a strike team. It could be a crew on a helicopter, smoke jumpers. They're all small teams that are led by a designated leader. So human factors is all about working as a member of a team and working by yourself. So if you are in a team of any description, or if you have to work by yourself in a high risk situation, then human factors definitely has applications for you.
Conway, I've realized a long time ago attending one of your courses how valuable your courses are for the type of industries that we work in. And if someone wanted to make contact with you from a different agency or a different country to have you teach your skills to them, would you be open to that? And if so, how would they make contact with you? What would be the best way?
Oh, well, you can just do a Google search for my name, but my business name is IPAS, Independent Productions and Aviation Services, IPAS. So you can just do a Google search for that, but I can also put up a contact details at the end of this screen if you like. And yes, I'm more than happy to travel anywhere in the world to provide that training. What I like to do, though, is once I know what the client's needs are, I usually do a gap analysis, and I find out if they have anything specific that they have identified as being a problem within their organization. And then I will tailor the course to concentrate on that problem. And this is a really good get out of jail free card for a lot of managers, because they may actually have subordinates that become, say, problem children for them, and they want to be able to address it, but they want to do it in such a way that it comes from a third party. So it's not just the boss telling the worker this is a problem. It's someone who's independent also highlighting why it's a problem, and it has more weight. It's like, just because your dad said something, it's not necessarily true, but because your uncle says it, then it must be true. It's sort of like that sort of psychology. So if an organization does have a specific problem that has a human factors or CRM lesson that can be learnt from it, well, then I will incorporate that into a tailor-made course for that organization. That does require a bit of toing and froing to make sure that it is exactly what the client wants, but I really enjoy doing that because I learn a lot from these. And I'll just say one more thing. I am not an expert in anything, but I do know a lot about a lot of things. But I learn a lot more from the people that I deal with. And so I go and facilitate a course, and I talk about things, and I facilitate. I don't teach, I don't instruct. I facilitate the discussion, and I give them some insights from my studies. But the stuff that comes back, oh my goodness, it's just absolute gold. Some of the things that people tell me, the stories they tell me, and the lessons that they've learned, they're busy writing them down because they are fascinating. And then I try and integrate that into future courses. Of course, I make them anonymous, but the lessons are great. And I learn just as much from the people that I'm facilitating as they do from me.
Conway, could you put up your contact details for us on your PowerPoint there so people can see it? Also, I
Sure.
understand a lot of people may be interested in your books. I know I am. What I'm going to do in the description for this video and your other videos that we've done is put context in of how people can buy your books. And so if you're interested in Conway's writing, look at the description here and you'll see more about it. Conway, thank you a lot for taking your time for discussing these different things with us. They're very valuable for everybody. And yep, once you put up your contact details, that'd be great.
Thanks, Matt. I'll put up my website there. You can see all the details. There's all the links are on my website. So on the screen there, Mike, you've got my website, IPAS, so ipas.com.au. Don't forget the AU for Australia. That will show you everything that I do and give all the contact details as well. And if you go along the top there, you can have a look at the aviation training, all the different courses I do, the team training. I'm also an artist. I used to be the military artist, so all my artwork is up there. But there's also the pods, blogs, and vlogs. So I do a podcast. I haven't posted for a while, but there's one that may be of interest to your American audience especially, and that's the song, demystifying the song Convoy, which was very popular in 1976, 1977. And I go through and do a deep dive into that song and what it means to American history and the interstate highway system, and why police are called Smokey, and all about Smokey the Bear, which of course the Forest Service would know a lot about. So that was my first one. And then there's a whole swag of others there with mainly an Australian theme, but I think your viewers would find that interesting. Lastly, if you want any of my books, there's also a link there for the books that I've written and the ones that are coming out in the future as well. So I hope that helps you out there.
Oh, it does, Conway. And can you do a quick, just show us a little bit about your artwork too before we close out today?
Sure, no problem. So we go to the overview, and there's a number of different themes. So I do military themes. You can see at the top there we have some of the themes from the military, some portraits. I do animals, and I'll do profiles of military equipment, and then some unusual stuff like wood blocks and military emergency services equipment as well. I'm quite proud of some of the portraits that I've done. This one here, let's have a look. I was commissioned by the unit. This this guy here, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Distinguished Flying Cross when he was on exchange with the British Army for work in Iraq. He was a co-pilot on board an aircraft, and the captain was shot by the Iraqis, and the aircraft damaged, and so he was brought back. He brought back both, and was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross. This was my commander when I was flying drones in Afghanistan, and that there is my wife. She was a commander of a combat surgical team in Afghanistan, and there's some more portraits. So I do a whole swag of different things, and those are some of the portraits, and they're available on the website as well.
And Conway, you were a war artist for the Australian military, weren't you? Can you explain what that is to their viewers?
Yes. So the first war artists that were official were in the Australian Army back in 1916. A guy by the name of Will Dyson. You got to remember that back in those days, they didn't have social media. They didn't have correspondence that had cameras. So they relied a lot on artists. And so Will Dyson was the first Australian official war artist. And his job became so successful, they started appointing new war artists. The United States did the same. So did Canada. And then they did the same again in World War II and also in Korea. After Korea, we didn't have any more uniformed war artists, so war artists from the Army. Instead, it was from one of our institutions called the Australian War Memorial. So they provided the artists for those different conflicts. So I was the first uniformed war artist. There I am on the screen doing a painting. Uniformed war artist. I was the first one since the Korean War, and I was appointed by the Chief of Army. And so I deployed to Iraq. The second time, the first time as a pilot, the second time as an artist. And then when I was in Afghanistan flying drones, the Chief of Air Force visited, and he appointed me the official war artist for the Air Force for its operations in Afghanistan. And so my task was to capture the mood of the uniformed people in those conflicts in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and try and sort of, these days everything's digital. So going back to the old pencil and paper or paint and paintbrush is quite novel. And so they wanted to try and capture it in that way. And that's what my task was.
Conway, thanks a lot for your time and sharing all these great ideas with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you again.
No worries. Thank you, mate.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.